Well, good morning, everybody. What a great day to be on the radio show listening to this show, Unfiltered. I'm Pastor Jason Gaszak, and I'm glad you're with me this morning. And I have a guest with me today, somebody that's not yet been on the show. And he's actually from the same radio network, Real Talk Radio Network, from the Patriot Enclave. I have Brian Nieves with me. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm just wondering why. I mean, there's been several episodes now, and this is my first time on the show.
Well, I had to figure out what I'm doing before I bring the pro on here with me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Listen, if this is your first time this morning, let me explain just a little bit of what this show is about. Unfiltered is about me or whoever's with me, my guest, bringing up controversial topics from social, political, or even biblical arenas to talk about the hard to talk about stuff. Now, listen, part of this is for me or whoever is with me is to bring an unfiltered perspective. So there's going to be things that you may not like, you may not agree with, and that's okay. I always say you have the right to be wrong because I feel like the people I bring on, we pretty much, I feel like we know our stuff pretty well.
Or they could refer to the 80-20 rule.
There you go, the 80-20 rule. I like that. So I always want to make clear, too, that it doesn't matter, if you don't know this, I'm the pastor of Roots Church out in St. Clair, and Brian actually is my executive pastor who actually just spoke this past weekend and brought the fire on Mother's Day. He talked about compassion, and he knocked it out of the park, had lots of feedback. And so just to kind of give you a heads up of what we do, but the goal is to take these subjects that most churches or pastors wouldn't talk about and then bring a biblical perspective or really an opinion, because you may already know this, that there's not every area in the Bible is black and white. So we have a lot of gray areas. So what we try to do is we try to decipher this perfect message that God gave us, and we try to, project it to the people listening. So here's what I will say. No matter what background you're from, whether you're rich, you're poor, you're black, you're white, Hispanic, Bosnian, Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care what you are, you need to know that you are loved, and we genuinely do care about you. Again, however, you may not like what we have to say, and that's okay. On this show, it's okay to agree to disagree. And I tell people, Brian, that they have the right to be wrong. I kind of said that earlier. I tell my wife this, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong.
Yeah. I've probably had that conversation with my wife.
It doesn't ever go that well, but
not a great
that's
one.
just the kind of way I look. So, Brian, this is the first time you've been on my show, and I'm on your show most Thursdays. I'm not sure.
Where were you this, what was it, like a couple days ago?
Yeah, I, believe it or not, my daughter got married on Friday, and I'm still recovering. Somebody asked me, because I've been having some blood pressure stuff, and, I guess over the age of, 45 these days, I'm 47, they tell you that's just part of life, that you start having to deal with blood pressure and different things. So they put a heart monitor on me, and one of my friends texted me this morning and said, "How's your heart?" And I was like, well, it's actually doing pretty good. I said it was broken on Friday night, but then, it's going to take me a couple of weeks to recover. I know you've had 2 daughters go through this marriage thing. How is it now?
Well, I can tell you, which this is something you'll never experience, but the second one is a little bit easier than the first one.
I can see that.
The first time, man, here's this little girl. I mean, it doesn't matter how old my daughters get or how adult they get or how much adulting they do.
Right.
They're always going to be that little baby girl that I remember. And the process, at some point, hopefully in their teenage years, I hope most people would agree that it's not a good idea to let girls fully date while they're only 10 or 11 or 12,
Yeah, right.
But at some point, whatever that age is that the family has decided on, all of a sudden these hairy-legged boys start coming around, wanting to be around our daughters, right? And we know way back, we knew that eventually one of these gorillas was going to take our girl from us, but there's no way to be prepared for it.
Yeah, and I mean, we were there. We were those gorillas at one point, right?
I know, that's the problem.
And we knew what we did, and now... Here's the thing. I want to talk. We're just going to spend a few minutes on this in this first segment talking about this. Maybe you're a dad out there and you're saying, man, I don't know what that day is going to look like. Or maybe you've already experienced this and you're laughing at me right now going, trust me, it gets better. I don't know where you're at. But, I got to thinking about this, and I'm super blessed to have a great man of God, number one, marrying my daughter. I am, because that's what we prayed for, right? I mean, from the day my daughter was born, my wife and I, we have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. And from the day all of our kids were born, we began to pray for their future spouse, because
Amen.
When I married my wife, I just couldn't imagine what that felt like for my father-in-law, not really knowing, am I really going to take care of her the way he expects me to take care of her? And that's the question that I believe all of us men have said, what's he going to do? Is he going to take care of her financially? Right. Is he going to love her? Is he going to care for her? I mean, all these questions flood your mind.
Yeah.
And it's like this big trust thing. How was it for you with both of yours?
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, it like you said, it's something that you cannot prepare yourself for. So for all the dads out there that are in the club with Jason and I, where you already have a daughter or daughters that have gotten married, you know exactly what we're talking about.
For sure. For
those of you that have not yet gone through this, I'm just going to tell you, you cannot start early enough.
Yeah.
If you have a baby girl, you need to be starting right now.
Yeah.
You need to be loving that girl. You need to be paying attention to her. You need to be demonstrating in your relationship with your daughter. And listen, I'm not saying I did it perfect. I'm sure Jason's not saying he did it perfect. I look back on it now. I wish I would have done so many things differently. Yeah. But at least I knew, because someone had taught me, that I needed to give these girls a lot of attention, a lot of love, so that they would see modeled in their dad what we would hope that they would look for when they find a husband.
What's scary is it's been told that your girl will actually look for a guy like their dad.
Yeah.
And so, dads, if that's what your daughter's going to look for, that puts you in a tight spot of figuring out how to treat your wife, how to treat your girl. One thing, Brian, that I did was, and I learned this from a friend of mine. Actually, they were older and they kind of already experienced this, and he started dating his daughter early on, and he said, "I take my daughter on regular dates to show her what a man should treat her like."
Right.
And so that's what Zoe and I started doing. I started dating her. And of course, you hear me talk about it when we talk about family or talk about anything with dating or whatnot. I talk about this specific thing, saying, dads, don't just assume that things are going to be fine in your relationship. Literally be intentional on dating your daughter, taking on dates, doing fun things. And then in those moments when you're out with her, you're just really, without her really knowing it, you're teaching her what to look for in a man.
Yeah, modeling it.
Every time you turn around, you should be modeling it, because, man, that day is going to come, and it's scary. And your daughters didn't just date the one guy. She dated a couple guys, as they grow, and my daughter's dated a few men out there, and you just never know who they're going to end up being with.
Some of them you chase off real quick, and then and I'm blessed, just like you are, that both of my girls, they married guys that I approved of while they were dating, that I approved of. And we're an old traditional family. Both of my sons-in-law, before they popped the question to each of my daughters, they both made an appointment with me.
I was going to ask, did you interview them?
Oh, yeah. And I interviewed them when they very first started dating.
Oh, there you go.
And then they had to ask me permission.
Yeah, there's a book actually called, and I think I'll have to look it up, but I think it's by Dennis Rainey maybe, and it's called Interviewing Your Daughter's Date.
Oh yeah,
I've read that book, and I did the very same thing. Yeah. You have to do that, because first of all, my first question is, what's your intention?
Yeah,
with my daughter.
Look me in the eye.
And then I have, in the book it talks about how he has a bat on his mantle that is it's engraved with "Enforce Her."
Right.
It's the enforcer.
I love it.
But it was dating your daughter, making sure that you're understanding what this looks like, and knowing that the day's going to come that you're going to give your daughter away. And I did that this past Friday. We had an amazing time, and I'm excited. Well, hey, we're getting ready to take a break, and I want to let you know a couple things we're going to talk about today, just so that way you don't just tune us out or change the radio or maybe get up and go do something else. Listen to us on the app if you have to leave. But we're going to be talking about 3 different subjects today, and one of them is holiness, and another one is talking about do we live in a Christian nation? And the last one we're going to talk about is cancel culture. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the Unfiltered Radio Show. And if you just missed the first segment, we were talking about our daughters getting married. Mine just got married on Friday. It was a lot of fun. But what we want to do now is we want to kind of switch gears, and I want to talk to you guys about a subject. You know, again, if you missed this, I had Brian Nieves with me on today from the Patriot Enclave. He's on the Real Talk Radio Network. Actually, Brian, why don't you just go ahead and tell him real quick when your show, because I only do a weekend. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot easier for me to do one. However, you have multiple things. So tell us a little bit when your show airs.
Yeah, so my show, The Patriot Enclave with Brian Nieves, runs Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. So 2 hours every day, Monday through Friday. Typically, it's never a guarantee, and it's not absolutely for sure. But normally, you're with me on Thursdays.
Right.
And so we do on Thursday. I always thought it was good to have a man of the cloth.
Yeah, tell us the days that you have.
So I'll start with Monday. And so each day in the Patriot Enclave is lightly themed, right? Like the theme does not control the day, but it's kind of lightly themed. And so Monday we call Mama Bear Monday.
Okay.
And so on Mama Bear Monday, we talk a lot about public school education type stuff. What are the mama bears out there, seeing, experiencing? I have a homeschool mom that's typically on with me on Mondays, Ray Hedlund. Tuesday is what we call Ticked Off Tuesday. So on Ticked Off Tuesday, I'm usually in studio by myself. But we get tons of calls, people putting stuff on the app, just whatever it is that you're ticked off about. Maybe you're ticked off because the pothole at the intersection of 5th and Elm didn't get filled, or you're ticked off because whatever, just anything. It's no holds barred. What are you ticked off about? Wednesday is called We the Free People Wednesday. On Wednesdays, typically, I have Lindsay Pittner on with me. She's a public school teacher, and she goes over what we call the March Towards Marxism. Okay. And just helps us to understand how America really is moving in the direction of Marxism. Absolutely. And what we can do to stop it. Thursdays are what I call Thankful Thursday. Usually you're in the studio with me. And on Thankful Thursday, it's kind of the opposite of Ticked Off Tuesday. On Thankful Thursday, we talk about things that we're thankful for. And then on Friday, there's really no way to describe Friday's show other than its title, which is Free Fall Friday. Not Free for All Friday, Free Fall Friday, because it just falls apart, right? Yeah. And it is certainly the most fun of the 5 shows. Maybe not the most informative, but certainly the most fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So, hey, if you're listening to the show today, check him out on the Real Talk Radio Network on the app or 93.3. Monday through Friday from 3 to 5. Okay, so Brian, let's talk about something that has really occurred to me lately. I read an article just a couple days ago about how pastors don't hold their congregations to a holiness standard in fear of making maybe someone mad. I think the question is pastors are avoiding talking about or preaching about holiness in the church due to morally compromised, quote unquote, personal lives.
Sure.
And I totally can relate to this because really, I think a lot of pastors, especially today, coming through COVID, churches have fallen apart. People haven't, not everybody's come back. When you get in bad habits of not going to church because they kept us from gathering in so many places, you get in a habit of not coming. And so it's hard to get them to come back because you just create different habits. And so when they start to come back, you have a fear of not really being maybe completely real or completely honest about God's word because you're afraid you're going to offend them. Because as you know, we have sinners. Our church, just in case you're wanting to know, is full of sinners.
Yeah, and guess what? Whatever church you go to is full of sinners.
Absolutely. And so it is a challenge, I think, to do this. And I just want us just take a couple minutes here and talk about this because when you think of the word holy, so many people think that it's this perfect picture of a Christian never sinning and you have to do everything just right. And, religious people usually kind of take on that side of it that, if you do anything outside of, God's word, obviously you're the sinner, which is true, but none of us are perfect. We're going to mess up. And so when I teach about holiness, what holiness is, it's real simple. It just means set apart. So when you think of that, as Christians, we literally should be living a life that looks very different from those who are not Christians.
Right.
I mean, if you're a Christian and you look no different than someone else out there of how you talk and how you live your life, your integrity, character, moral values, then you're not really being a very good example to the rest of the world of what Christianity is. And that is a huge struggle. And you hear me talk about this, and I'm not afraid, obviously, to let people know, but I think this one article, this pastor, he went really extreme to the right. But I just want to hear your take on how do you feel we do as a church? And listen, guys, this is a subject Brian didn't know that I was really bringing this up necessarily. The thing that I love about Brian is he's going to be real with me and everybody else, for that matter, of how we talk about these subjects and what our viewpoint is.
Yeah.
Share just a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you, because I was in the Navy and then because of my professional background, Julie and I have lived in a bunch of different cities, mostly because you move a lot when you're in the military. And so we've been involved in quite a number of churches. And I'll tell you, no church is perfect. Roots is far from perfect,
Yep.
right? But in terms of understanding this whole philosophy that says we can love the sinner while not being accepting of the sin,
Yeah.
right? I think what we're seeing a lot in today's society is, just like you said, pastors are afraid, right? And once a pastor is afraid, whatever he or she does after that is probably not going to be that great.
Yeah.
Because you cannot lead people that you need,
Yep.
and you don't do well when operating in fear,
Yep.
right? And so people tend to be afraid to talk about these difficult issues because, as you said, they're afraid they're going to offend somebody in the congregation. Well, here's what I've found, and what I appreciate, one of the things I appreciate about how we do things here at Roots is we understand that truth is sweet to the ear, even when it's something the person didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
So when a person is sitting in the audience and they hear you or me or whoever's preaching that day talking about sin, very directly talking about sin, we can do that without giving condemnation to the people that we're speaking to.
That's good.
We can say XYZ, whatever it is, fill in the blank for whatever sin it is that you're talking about. We can say XYZ is something that a holy God is not in favor of.
Right.
And something that we don't accept, even though we love you.
Yeah. One of the big, probably today, subjects that I'm seeing more and more, everybody would think, oh, it's drinking. No, it's not actually. It's actually two people that are not married living together.
Yep.
That's like been the biggest one right now in the church because, unfortunately, our generations today, the younger generations today, just feel like that's just normal now. Let's just live together, and as we live together, we're trying this out. We'll eventually get married maybe. And so when in our church, we have people that literally are not married. They live together. They hear me say that, hey, there's nowhere in the Bible, okay, if you want to talk about the Bible does not specifically say in Scripture that an unmarried couple should not live together. But there are other scriptures in the Bible that give us wisdom of why they should not live together. It's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's about, is it wise? And so the temptation of staying in the same home. I mean, I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm just telling you right now, as a single man.
No, not happening. I've had so many people tell, we just live together.
Yeah,
we
right.
don't have sex.
Yeah.
Okay, you're a better man than I.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a better man than I.
There is absolutely no way that's going to take place. And so you have these things of wisdom. And listen, what we're going to do, unfortunately, time goes by so fast.
It's
when
crazy.
you're talking about this. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll kind of pick this up and go into our next segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here in just a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Unfiltered Radio Show, and before we went to the break, we were literally talking about holiness. We were talking about a Christian, living a life worthy of, holiness, and we were talking about couples living together. That's kind of the thing right now. Young couples living together before they're married. And I've had many people come to me and say, yeah, but there's nowhere in the Bible does it say you can't. Because, as you know, people will find a little loophole to fit their narrative.
Well, and listen, you could do that with any subject, right? Like you could say, well, there's nowhere in the Bible where it specifically says, and then fill in the blank with some kind of something, right? But here's what happens. The Bible is filled, as you know, is filled with principles, right? The principles of God cover everything, right? So when people say, and I'll just mention, Jason, I'm actually seeing a lot of, and it's not just the young people that I see doing this. I see people of every age category doing this, where they're living together. And the thing is, they might say to their pastor, well, we're not having sex.
Right.
Okay. Well,
that's the first thing they say.
Yeah. If they say that to me, I'm going to say, look, I love you, but I'm just not buying it. Right. Yeah. I'm just not buying it. But here's the thing. Even if that was true, the level of intimacy that comes when a man and a woman live together, and I just want to be very clear about this. Please, anybody that's hearing my words right now, please don't think for 1 minute that I have a holier than thou attitude, right? Because maybe your sin is the sin of living together, but what if all of us had to wear shirts that on the front of our shirt, it described our top 10 sins?
Yeah, that would be embarrassing.
We would never judge anybody else, right? So I'm not judging anybody. I'm not, I'm just saying that the church cannot act like this stuff is okay.
Yeah. But that's the thing, and we don't. So we let people know. They come to me and they let me know that they're doing it, and they know it's not right. And I tell them, I say, you know what, listen, the best thing to do is get this rectified right away. I've encouraged people to get married right away. If you're already living together, I don't understand why you're not getting married. They're afraid of that commitment. And I've said this before. That piece of paper that you get from the state of Missouri means jack to me. It doesn't mean anything. All it does is say you can file taxes together now. Oh, thank you. I get some tax benefits, which, believe me, it isn't much. Yeah. What means more to me is the covenant that we are making between my wife and I and God. That's the most important thing. And so, listen, at the end of the day, I love people where they are. And if you want to live with somebody and not be married, and you want to have premarital sex, and you want to do some of the things that you want to do, you're going to know from me in this church that it is not right. But at the same time, you're going to say, you're going to hear from me, you know what, we still love you, and it's not right, but we love you, and it's your life you're messing up.
Right.
It's not my life. You're the one that's going to suffer the consequences. And then 5 years down the road, when you're sitting in my office crying the blues because it didn't work out and yada, 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 well, it's because you didn't start off the right way to begin with.
Yep.
And God knows better than anybody of why he put these principles and these parameters in place, because he knows the pain and hurt that we go through.
Right.
But we're not willing sometimes to go through it. And I'll end on this. Our church is based off of truth and grace. So here's what I say. You have grace for me as I give the truth of God's word, and I'll have grace for you as you try to live out the truth.
Right. Exactly.
And that's really where we are with it.
And being welcomed, I think there's also a dividing line that says, okay, we welcome anybody into the church. I mean, Jesus dined with sinners.
Yeah.
Right? So we welcome anybody into the church.
Yep.
But if you're going to be a part of church leadership, then we might have to examine things a bit more closely.
Sure, yeah,
right?
because as you start to climb the ladder in leadership, the way I say that is your rights get taken away. They get stripped away. So you can't just keep doing what you've always done and act like it's okay, because we're to live like examples as well, when it comes to the church. So listen, we are to live a holy life. There's nothing wrong with saying that we're holy. We should be holy. We should be set apart from what the world views us. Let me ask you another question. This is another question. We're going to switch gears just a little bit. A lot of people think that we, the United States, is a Christian nation. This has been a debate in modern politics. It's definitely controversial. It's more controversial even than the role of religion. I'm going to read you just a little bit, and we're going to talk about this. The United States, in particular, finds this subject provocative. The very question, is the United States a Christian nation, can be a source of debate because the term Christian nation can be taken to mean several different things, causing the answer to vary drastically. And here are these three things. Is the United States a Christian nation? And each of these things actually requires a different approach, and the results have a different answer. Here's the first one, is whether or not the United States is the product of a Christian worldview, and the answer is absolutely yes. We are a product of a Christian worldview. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The second question is whether or not the U.S. currently demonstrates a Christian worldview.
Wow.
If you know where we are right now, even in politics and who's in office, that answer is absolutely no. I mean, when you're literally debating if the fact about abortion in itself,
Yes.
that'll tell you right there, no. The third angle is whether the government of the United States is Christian in its structure, and the answer is, sort of.
Yeah.
We try to have the structure, but then, as you know, because I mean you've been deep into the political world, okay, serving as our senator. I feel like the deeper you get, the more crap you see.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it's hard to be that. So here's the deal: there's no conflict between biblical principles and the civic principle of religious freedom. In fact, it is precisely because the United States was founded on biblical principles. This is what we were talking about before. There are biblical principles that our forefathers believed in, that
Yes.
they did set up the laws and the things that we have in front of us, and only governments are rooted in Judeo-Christian values allow such broad freedom. That's the best thing about really the United States of America.
Absolutely.
I want to read to you something in a minute, but let me hear a little bit when you think about our government right now, where it is, and people look at me weird when I tell them that we are not a Christian nation.
Yep.
And they thought for the longest time, because maybe they've been taught that, maybe somebody thought that, and maybe they were just confused because of, the fact that our forefathers based our whole setup on the principles of Christianity, but a nation as a whole, that's just not the way it is.
Right. So for us to be a Christian nation would mean that we were a theocracy, right, rather than operating as a constitutional republic.
Okay.
So the United States is a constitutional republic, which means that we have a Republican form of government, and that's not Republican in terms of the Republican Party.
Correct.
It's just that's the style of government that we have. So America is not a Christian nation, otherwise it would be a theocracy, but it is a nation that was founded on Christian principles, right? So like the guys who wrote the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the people that we refer to as our founding fathers, the majority of them, and ladies and gentlemen, do not let pop culture, do not let our government schools, do not let anybody ever try to tell you otherwise. The overwhelming majority of our founding fathers were espousing Christians, okay? They were Christians. That doesn't mean that every single one of them was a Christian. It doesn't mean that they were holy men, but they were Christians, okay? Right. And so as they drafted the United States Constitution, they referenced a number of different types of books and history type things, blah, blah, blah. Well, the number one most referenced, book when they were writing the Constitution is the Christian Bible. And so, yes, absolutely, we are a nation founded on Christian principles, but we are not a Christian nation.
Yeah, and when you look at the Constitution and you look at the Bill of Rights for being able to express our religious views with freedom, that was absolutely to protect us from a government church.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't understand that, and that's where the separation of church and state comes into play. And Brian, you and I both talk about this with our staff, and we let them know there will be a day that we are going to have to draw a line in the sand, because people say, oh, well, in Romans, we got to submit to governing authorities. And yes, you're right, until it goes against God's word.
Right.
And then when that happens, then we got to do exactly what you say on your radio show every day. We got to be the resistance, and we got to stand up, and we got to fight, and we got to. And what do you say? The rebellion part. Tell me that. You remember that one?
The time has come for massive disobedience.
Non-compliance.
Right. Because when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes our duty.
Yeah.
And see, a lot of Christians, I'm telling you, this is one of my pet peeves amongst Christians, right? Because Christians act like we have to submit to everything that the government says.
Tuck our tails,
right? But the thing is, see, when Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, he was talking about an entirely different form of government. In the United States, we, as the citizenry, the citizens are in fact Caesar, because it is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and it is a government that runs by the consent of the governed, right? Yep. So we are Caesar. Now, do we have to submit to proper law? Yes, laws that fit under the guidelines of the United States Constitution. We are obligated as Christians to follow those laws. The problem is our government operates so far outside of the Constitution that it leaves a lot of places where our proper Christian response is to rebel or to resist, right? And that doesn't mean that we're jerks about it. It just means that, listen, if we take that philosophy, remember, I do my daily reminders, right? Daily reminder number 2, a river can only flow in one direction. Look at what your government is doing, right? But the bottom line is a river can only flow in one direction. So if a Christian, I believe it's an absolute cop-out for a Christian to say, oh, brother, we have to do whatever the government tells us to.
Yeah.
Okay, let's follow that line of logic out to its logical end. And the government, as we've seen, the government is going to continue to be more and more ungodly and expect more and more ungodly stuff from us. So where do we draw the line?
Right. Somebody said the other day that they thought if Jesus was here today, that he would literally be a socialist because of how he loves people.
If Jesus was here today, he'd be turning over some tables, brother. I mean,
I'm telling you, if we had to go back in the biblical times to live, we would hate it compared to what they had to go through and the way the laws were and the way the teachings were, the way Paul taught. I mean, people think that I'm rough. People think that I bring it direct. That is nothing compared to the way Paul was, whatever he spoke. And when it comes to these issues, man, I think about our government right now. Okay, so one thing I learned from you, Brian, that really, I'm just going to say this because I know we got to go in another break here in just a minute, but something I learned from you, it's been at least 7 years ago. But something you said to me was a lot of times people don't understand what our Constitution and our Bill of Rights were designed for. A lot of people think that it's to help the government stay on track, but really it's to protect us from the government.
Right.
So we're not over-governed. That's the whole problem. Right now, unfortunately, okay, if you're a Biden supporter, please understand this. They are over-governing us. They are going way too far of our freedom and our rights and the way we believe and the things we stand for as a nation in general. And so for me, that's what I've learned from you is say, hey, this Constitution and the Bill of Rights is to protect us from the tyranny of the government.
Right. The Constitution is literally a contract. It is a contract between the people and the government. And that contract says, okay, government, you operate within these confines and only within these confines. And when they step outside of that, the government, they're violating their contract with us.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, this has been fun, and we got to take another break, and we'll come right back for the last segment in just a few moments. Don't go nowhere. We'll see you in just a few. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are back, and we are ready to finish out this show.
Final segment, man.
I know, it goes fast.
What the heck?
We need like 3 hours to talk about these things because I'm going to get you fired up one of these days when we get in here.
Oh, man.
We need you unfiltered. Listen, I don't know.
You want something unfiltered? I'll give you something unfiltered right now.
Okay, do it.
So, in the beginning, we were talking about our daughters getting married and the relationship between dads and their daughters.
Yep.
I believe that the most significant relationship in the life of a young woman is the relationship that she has with her dad.
Okay? Oh, absolutely.
And I will take it a step further and say, you guys out there that have little girls, you better be loving on them. You better be hugging on them. You better give them appropriate physical love, right?
Right.
Hugging them, kissing them, appropriately, not Joe Biden style, but appropriate,
Don't
appropriate
be sniffing their neck.
Physical love with your girls, right?
Yeah.
Because they need that.
Yeah.
And if you don't give them appropriate physical love, some hairy-legged boy is going to give him inappropriate physical love in the backseat of his car.
Well, the girl starts looking for it elsewhere, and then what happens is they look for it in the wrong guy.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Because that guy that they're looking into, they're literally there for one thing and one thing only, and if they can schmooze them in the right way of knowing what they want, the next thing you know, boom.
Yep.
It's over.
Backseat.
Man, that's when you pull out, well,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying.
Let's talk about cancel culture.
Okay.
Before we get ourselves in trouble.
All right, we're going to talk about cancel culture. This is something obviously many people are dealing with right now, movie stars especially, even myself sometimes, talking about controversial things. And here at Roots Church, you need to know when it comes to culture, we actually create culture. Cancel culture is not a law that anybody put into place. It's literally a culture that we accept in our lives. And so here at Roots, we actually have three main things that we actually create culture with. The first one, which I think is the most important one, is we have a culture of loving people where they are. Yep. Again, we said it earlier, living a life of holiness is, yes, we want you to live a life of holiness, but at the same time, we love you where you are. And people need to know, because as you know, most people, when they come into a church, they think they got to have their crap together.
Right.
And they got to get everything going, and they can't really belong to something until, they start doing everything right. Well, we say we want you to belong before you behave.
And, I'll tell you, there's plenty of things that we, and when I say we, I mean, I'm part of the leadership at Roots, sure. Right? I mean, there's plenty of things that we do wrong here. But I'm going to tell you something that I'm very excited about what we do is how we balance this idea that you're talking about right now, where we say, look, come in all your mess, right? We're not going to celebrate it with you. We're not going to say it's okay. But I think a lot of churches either go too far one way or too far the other way.
Yeah.
In other words, they're so legalistic that they chase the sinner away. The sinner never feels like they can go into that church and be a part of that church. And then on the other side is we have these extremely liberal churches that are so, whether you call it seeker-friendly, whatever you call it, they're so that way that they're like, oh, you're living in a situation where you have orgies every night with 15 different couples all coming together and having
swingers.
Okay, great. You can be on staff here
Just
at our
swing
church.
On in.
You can be, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they take it so far the other way where that sweet spot, and I'm not saying we do it perfectly,
right?
But I think we're pretty close to the sweet spot.
We've missed it. I mean, you miss it sometimes.
Sure.
I mean, that's just the way it is. But when you miss it and you catch it, you fix it.
Right.
And then that's when people, they lose their stuff because it's like, wait a minute, you were okay with it before. No, we didn't know this was going on.
Come with all your mess.
Yep.
Just don't keep your mess.
Yep. Don't stay that way. The other one is serving. We think it's super important to create a culture of serving. We have a lot of volunteers at Roots Church because I believe a healthy church has a strong volunteer team. Many hands make light work. Yep. The pastor can't do it all. And
nor should he.
No, and there's so many pastors out there that think they got to do it. They're afraid to ask somebody to help them with something. And I even know leaders that do the same thing. Listen, we were created to serve others.
Right.
So that's a culture we try to create, is that we want to serve others because guess what? It's not all about us.
Right. And it doesn't mean you're a bad pastor if you're doing all this stuff that really the pastor should not do.
Probably know.
But you're restraining your church from growing.
Yeah. And they're not educated. When you go to seminary, or like to say cemetery school, they don't teach you how to pastor. They don't teach you all the things. They didn't teach you how to deal with COVID and mask mandates and vaccines and all the racial stuff that we're doing. They do not teach you that in seminary. So that's stuff you learn, when you're out actually pastoring, or maybe you're learning from someone else. I learned a lot of the stuff that I know from other pastors that have been doing this. And so it's important that we help people understand what it means to serve. Here's the third culture we create, and that is giving. This is the one in the subject that a lot of churches, or even people in general, they don't like to talk about. But at Roots Church, we create a culture that we don't have a problem talking about money and giving. We want to create extravagant givers because we believe it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. Why? Because we want to be a blessing to other people. Right. The reason why I want God to bless my socks off, and I mean fill my pocket so full that I can't hold it and contain it, is so that way I can bless other people in need, or really just to be a blessing. I mean, to me, you don't need me to pay for your meal technically, right? And I don't need people to pay for my meal, but there is something about just being blessed and having the money. So you create culture, and here's the other thing with culture is you got to work hard. You got to fight to keep that culture.
Yes.
And what we're seeing today in the cancel culture world is when someone doesn't agree with whatever's going on, they literally try to cancel you. And I'll think of the one person that just, knocked it out of the park. And I'm not saying he was right for what he said, because he even admitted, I shouldn't have done it, whatever his reasoning was. And that was Morgan Wallen. The country singer. He had a racial slur, and they tried to wipe him off the face of the earth. And guess what? He's more popular today than he has ever been.
Yeah.
And I love it, because to me, cancel culture sucks.
Well, I think they took it too far. I think people, and I typically refer to them as leftists, right? But I think leftists have taken their agenda too far, where they try to cancel. Unless you are an extreme leftist and you can live your life by the leftist ideology, they will come after you and try to get you canceled. Yeah. Well, I think they've gone too far, and now America is beginning to reject this whole idea of cancel culture. Why? Because they took it too far.
Yeah, and that's what they do. The left always takes it too far. I like it that, people try to cancel me or cancel our church. They try to say we're a cult, because here's the deal. The reason why people do that is, one, they're either jealous, or two, you're actually doing something for the Lord that the devil can't stand. And he's going to use people to try to take that away, try to destroy that. So that's what I got on cancel culture. Listen, it's already the end of the show, man.
Golly. Well, no, we still got like 30 seconds. So,
I know.
We can still pack a little more in here.
We can pack it in.
We haven't offended everybody yet.
I wanted to know if you have what are some upcoming things. Do you have anything specific coming up that you're going to be addressing on Monday, or whatever day you got?
Yeah. Well, just keep in mind, Monday is Mama Bear Monday, so we'll be, we kind of lightly theme it. We kind of keep things along the lines of what's happening culturally that moms would not be happy with, or that moms need to keep their eye on.
So listen, join Brian on Monday from 3 to 5 on Real Talk Radio. Other than that, guys, we have got to go. It's been a great day. You can go to the app, punch in some comments if you want to. Let us know how we're doing. We love you guys, and we will see you next week.